NWP Radio.
You're listening to NWP Radio, a production of the National Writing Project.
NWP. NWP Radio.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, moms and dads, aunts and uncles, grandparents. What a pleasure it is to take part in a special production of the National Writing Project Radio. Our series, The Right Time, brings National Writing Project teachers from across our network together with young adult and children's authors to discuss books, craft, and writing processes. During these challenging times, they also share hope, possibility, and inspiration through the power of words.
Hey everybody, I am Tanya Baker, the Director of National Programs at the National Writing Project, and it's my great pleasure to be hosting The Right Time with my friend and colleague, Brian Ripley Crandall, the Director of the Connecticut Writing Project at Fairfield University. For each episode, we are very excited to bring together a fantastic young adult or children's author and a teacher from our network who will interview them about their work. It's my pleasure to welcome, it's our pleasure to welcome the teacher and the guest author, and of course, all our viewers and listeners as well. This week, I am particularly excited to introduce you, if you don't already know him, to Jeff Zentner. Jeff is the author of The Serpent King, a New York Times notable book, winner of the William C. Morris Award, and recipient of many other accolades. And also Goodbye Days, named an ALA-YALSA Top 10 Best Fiction for Young Adults title. Jeff was a Publishers Weekly Flying Start and an Indies Introduced pick. His book, Rayne and Delilah's Midnite Matinee, is an ode to best friends who make things together. He lives in Nashville with his wife and son. You can follow him on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, or visit him at jeffzentnerbooks.com.
One of the major goals of the Right Time series is to bring hope and possibility to our listeners. This is why introducing my colleague and good friend, Susie Q the Penguin, it brings me tremendous joy. She is the epitome of hope and of optimism. She brings love, hugs, and friendship in everything she does, including the fact she introduced me to Jeff a few months ago at NCTE. More formally, Dr. Susan Densmore-James is an associate professor at the University of West Florida and the director of the Emerald Coast National Writing Project at UWF. She was a classroom teacher for 17 years before attending FSU for a dual PhD in reading and language arts. Dr. James prepares pre-service teachers and is known as the book dealer for her work with literacy and young adult literature.
And I think it's over to you.
Yeah, it's the National Writing Project teacher, it's the National Writing Project tradition. It's National Writing Project teachers doing the National Writing Project tradition. To give you 3 minutes with a writing prompt. We hope such writing invitations spur listeners to keep writing after each episode. And at this time, I'm handing it over and bumping it to Jeff and Susan. Susan, you have a prompt for us, right?
I sure do. This is a prompt that I love doing with students of all ages. It's what I call the stick figure. And you can use this to get to know your students in the class. But when you're starting to work on character development, you want to scaffold instruction. And so I would like my audience to think of your favorite character from a young adult book. I want you to try to write a few strong words, use your strong word choice to write about what does this character think? What are the words or the mantra of this individual? What are the strengths and weaknesses? What do they love? What do they see in front of them? And what would they like to eliminate or stomp out? So I'm going to give you 3 minutes and let's write in the day.
About 30 seconds. All right, time. Awesome prompt. Thanks, Susan.
You're welcome. Jeff, it is so good to have you here, to see your face. You know, your work I have talked about not only to the National Writing Project teachers, but teachers all over the nation. You have a very wide audience. It amazes me at the range of ages that enjoy your work. In fact, all of my teachers, when you speak at the National Writing Project events, they are so excited to see you. And I know why that is. Your books are authentic. They are soul inspiring. And your characters, the major ones and even the minor ones, just have a huge impact on your readers. And that's why I selected the stick figure today, because I thought that that would get us into discussing the characters in your book. And I've kept it a secret as to which character I wrote about, but now you're going to know it is Carver Briggs.
Oh, I like Carver.
I love Carver. Carver, you know, as I was sitting here thinking about Carver, you know, he thinks all the time. He's always thinking. And the thoughts in his head are, you know, I may have killed my 3 best friends. And he moves that to, I know I killed my 3 best friends. And that's a major, you know, conflict to hold on to. But then there are a lot of things about him that, you know, he's soft-hearted and he loves to write and he loves Jasmine. He is very helpful. You know, I love the way he works with his friend's grandmother. I love Nana. You know, he wants to stomp out, for sure, texting. And he wants to stomp out the feeling that he has that stain of death on him because of a mistake that he made. But I tell you what I love about Carver is that he takes responsibility for his actions. To me, that's big. And, you know, just by sitting and working on this character sketch, it makes you really get into the characters. In fact, my college students used the stick figures to talk about all of your characters in all 3 of your works. And they created families and they talked about characters and how they changed throughout the course of the novel. It was great fun. But I want to ask you something. How do you develop these incredible characters, and how can we as teachers help our students do the same?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. This is a real honor, and thank you for the kind words about my books. Again, that's a huge honor. Carver's one of my favorite characters who I've ever written. I really love Carver. And if you like Carver, I think you're really going to like the protagonist of my 4th book, which is coming out next year, called In the Wild Light. The protagonist's name is Cash Pruitt. And he's got a lot in common with Carver, got a lot in common with Dill from the Serpent King. So I hope you'll like him. And you're going to see Nana Betsy again in the 4th book.
Yay.
She's got a small but pivotal role. So my books come from character. That is absolutely where my books begin and end. And for a very simple reason. I don't really know how to write a book. I really don't. I've never had a creative writing class of any kind, you know, no MFA, no training in writing. The only 2 things that I bring to writing are that I've read a lot of books and I love stories and I know what kind of stories I love. I know what kind of stories move me, and a real love for humanity and an interest in observing people and watching people, seeing how they live, how they interact, having a real curiosity and sense of wonder about the lives of other people. So that's really all I bring to the table as a writer. And so when I first set out about the project of writing for young people, I realized pretty quick that I had no idea what I was doing in terms of writing. And I thought, well, you know, I could never sit down across from a real person. I could never sit down across from you, Susan, and say to you, let me tell you who you are. Let me tell you where you've been, where you're going, who you love, who loves you, your desires, your fears, what you've overcome. None of those things. I can't tell you that. I just don't know. But I could sit there and listen to you tell me those things. And I could write those things down. And that kind of organically becomes a story, all of those things. We're all embodiments of stories in human bodies. We all contain a great story, this universe of memories, these experiences, these, as I say in Goodbye Days, these natural histories of scars and loves. And so if I can do that with real people, I figure that I can do it with fictional people. The trick is that I have to get to know these fictional people as truly as if I were sitting across from them, having a conversation with them. And then I can ask these fictional people, tell me who you are, and they'll tell me, and I just write down what they tell me, and that then becomes a story. So that's kind of how I cheat in writing my books, is I let somebody else write the story for me, and that somebody else happens to be my characters.
Well,
So,
you listen and you watch. You listen and you watch, and that, you know, with today's climate, that's so important. I'm very appreciative of that, and it comes out obviously in your character. So you don't have really a magic sauce other than listening and watching and trying to just listen to the characters and what they have to say to you then, huh?
yeah. So before I ever start writing, it generally takes about 3 or 4 months, this process. But it's like an incubation period. First of all, before I do anything, I figure out who fascinates me. I figure out what kind of people I want to get to know, what kind of lives I think I'm capable of inhabiting for 9 months to a year and a half, which is kind of generally how long it takes me to write a book. If I'm not writing somebody who's fascinating me, there's no way I'm going to get through that book. I don't have the attention span for that. So I have to write the characters I want to read. I have to write the people whose lives I want to inhabit. I have to write the people who I want to get to know. So first things first, I think about who fascinates me. Then I invite those people into my head, and they spend 3 or 4 months inside my head, just banging around up there. And that's where they begin to take root and become living human people inside my mind. So for 3 or 4 months, I just eavesdrop on their conversations. I just check in with them. I just listen to them. I listen as they tell me who they are, the things they love, what they desire, what they fear. I'll be in line at the grocery store and I'll check in with them, ask them what they think about, the line at the grocery store. I'll be in a boring meeting at work and I'll check in with them. So I'm constantly checking in with them, constantly figuring out these little character quirks and details. I'll search my catalog of memory for character quirks and details that I love, and I'll add those to the characters. I'll figure out which characters I want to embody certain character traits. Every one of my characters gets a little bit of me as a foundation. None of my characters are all me. There are some characters that come closer to others to being me. Carver happens to be one of those characters who has more of me in him than most, but none of my characters are just me on the page. I'm not an interesting enough person to write a story about myself. So all of my characters are, it's a quality of mine that I'm interested in seeing how it would grow when planted in different soil. So for example, with the character of Lydia in the Serpent King, she holds my curiosity about the world and my desire to put my voice into the world. And so I planted that seed in the character of a teenage girl to see how that seed would grow and bear fruit. It's a way of living another life through these characters.
Yeah, she's pretty phenomenal. I had a friend in high school that was very much like her, but the fact that she inspires Travis and Dill in so many ways to look past their hometown and look at what they really want to do in life is a pretty phenomenal characteristic of Lydia. Did you have any teachers in your K-12 experience that inspired this love for writing, or is this just something that you always knew you wanted to do?
So I had a fourth or fifth grade, I can't remember. I'm really bad with the history of my own life. But I had a teacher in elementary school named Mrs. Wheeler who made us write. And I loved it. I really enjoyed it. I absolutely loved it. She was so encouraging of my story. She published a little literary journal of all the students' writings. I still have a copy of it somewhere. But she was the first to make me think that I could become a writer. But hang on, my little assistant is coming to say hello to everybody. This is my Cabadoodle Bowie. He's my little helper.
Hi,
He,
Bowie.
lays behind me in his little dog bed. Sorry, I had to bring him in, otherwise he wouldn't let us alone.
I get it. My little dog has become extremely high maintenance during the coronavirus. It seems like it's always been needy, but it's getting way worse.
Yep. So she inspired my love of writing, and other teachers inspired my love of story. I had an English teacher named Mrs. Harrison who was amazing. I had an English teacher named Mr. Jewell who actually owned an independent bookstore with his wife. They were amazing. They inspired my love for story. But it was only later in life that I got up the courage to write, because even though I loved writing from Mrs. Wheeler's class, and even though I loved stories from Mrs. Harrison's class and Mr. Jewell's class, I didn't think of being an author as something that I could do. I kind of tended to put authors in ivory towers, as you do when you're a kid growing up in a small town and have never met a published author. So it took me a while before I actually got up the courage to write. It took me getting to know some published authors and realizing that they're not that different from me. It took me having a failed music career to let go of my fear of failure. So that's how I finally kind of came around to writing.
Well, I tell you, just, people seeing you online with the National Writing Project, that gives an opportunity for kids to see an author and to know that, that wasn't always your vision, but your love of stories, inspired your writing, which is absolutely amazing.
Sure.
I have to tell you that I cannot even count how many of my college students came to me and said, after reading Goodbye Days, that Carver made them feel less alone.
Wow.
And
the
way that you depict anxiety and what poor Carver goes through impacted my life as an adult, because my sister's best friend was killed in a car accident. And until I read Goodbye Days, I truly did not understand how she felt. And so your amazing characterization there has done a lot for a lot of people. So thank you. I'm so glad. I'm not glad that I know you didn't give up music completely, but I tell you, you've touched many lives with your writing.
Well, thank you.
Okay, so I have a tough question for you.
Okay.
We're going through some tough times. It's gotten to the point where I don't particularly even want to turn on the news, and I'm reading more, and my daughter's reading more. And today I even got a text from a student in my English class at the university that was wondering if we were going to have a National Writing Summer Institute. And he is one that analyzed all three of your pieces and the characters in those books. And he has a story in him that he wants to tell. And I was very happy to be able to tell him, yes, we're going to do some summer events with the National Writing Project. So that shows you the impact. But how do you see what's going on today with not just coronavirus, politics, everything else? We're seeing a lot of ugliness. How is this going to impact your writing for young adults?
So I write contemporary young adult fiction, which is real life. You know, it's there, no magic, no fantasy, none of that. And that stuff's wonderful. I love that stuff, but my heart really lies in the contemporary stories and the stories about kids who are products of the society they live in. And the thing that you cannot deny about our society is that it creates classes of privilege. It creates classes of privilege based on race, based on socioeconomic status, based on gender, based on sexual orientation, all sorts of things. It creates elaborate and complicated structures of privilege and power. And I think that if you want to write contemporary fiction and you want to take on the hard issues, then you have to deal with those currents of privilege that run through our society. In the Serpent King particularly, I was interested in writing about socioeconomic class in rural America, which is something that I know something about. I've got some firsthand experience with that. And so I felt like that was something that I could speak to authoritatively, the kind of way that money affords you a certain privilege. You move through the world in a certain way when you have money. When you have white skin in America, you can move through the world in a certain way that you are not able to do if you have black skin. It's white privilege. And so I think it's important, if you write contemporary young adult fiction, to contend with those things, to acknowledge those things, to wrestle with those things, because otherwise you're not telling the truth to the kids you write for. And that's the death knell for teen fiction, because teenagers have such keen BS detectors. I mean, if you lie to them, they'll know it immediately. They'll sniff you out instantly, and then you're done. You've lost credibility. And so you sort of have to deal with those things.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Are we going to see, I'm sure we will, because when my students, after they did their stick figures, they wrote a decalogue for each book and what they learned. And the themes that went across all three of your pieces, poverty was a discussion that we had, and I was very grateful for that. You know, being a woman, a white woman of privilege, you know, I think for the first time reading Rayne and Delilah, I realized, you know, here you have Dee Dee dealing with a mother that is single and can't afford medication. And so it opens the eyes, and it opened the eyes of my students. There were a lot of them that said, you know, I never thought that way. You know, another topic they talked about was the friendships, and that, you know, in all of your books, you know, you don't paint the world as being an easy one to live with, but you do show that with friends, being with your friends can make it manageable. So you do a fantastic job with that. And they talked a lot about grief and depression. And with the students that, you know, that we're seeing in K-12 and in college, we're seeing a lot of that in the schools. And so we talked about what I was especially appreciative of is that, you know, you always had a minor character that's not so minor that would help the people that were struggling to see that it's not a weakness to ask for help. And so your writing is very authentic with very authentic characters, but like you said, they're not sugar-coated. Who's the most difficult character for you to write about?
You know, I think I think villains are difficult to write because there is such a temptation to make them unnuanced and to make them, you know, kind of cartoonishly evil. When in fact, our world is not always so, you know, this or that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's hard to write. I think it's hard to write villains. Like my instinct is always to, if you're going to go to the trouble to write a villain, make them really villainous. But at the same time, I understand how quickly that can verge over into parody, you know what I mean? Self-parody. So I think villains are difficult to write. It's always difficult to write outside of your own experience. In Rayne and Delilah's Midnite Matinee, I wrote two teenage girls. I wrote from the point of view of two teenage girls. I am not, nor will ever be, a teenage girl. So to do that, I had to really approach that project with a lot of humility. And part of that humility is to, here I'm bragging about my humility, right? Is to leave aside your baggage, take off all the lenses through which you view or have viewed the world, leave aside your experiences, leave aside the way you think the world should be, and instead build a character based on your observation and imagination of how somebody who has had a very different life than you would view the world and would move through the world. So it's a very conscious removing of those filters. I feel like a lot of male writers get it wrong when writing women, when writing teenage girls, because they write women and girls the way they think they would be a woman or girl. And that's not it. That's not how you do it. I don't sit down to write a teenage girl and think, well, what if Jeff Zentner were a teenage girl? What would he do? I can't, because I can't do that. I have to build those characters from the ground up. So that's difficult to do. It's challenging to do. It's humbling to do. It's frightening to do, because you don't want to get those characters wrong. You don't want to, and again, it goes to the BS detector that teens have. If you build your story on fundamentally flawed characters, and I'm not talking about flaws in the sense that these are imperfect people you're depicting as characters. I'm talking about characters that have cracks in the very foundation of who they are as story characters. If you build those flawed characters into the story, then your story rests on a shaky foundation.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's why I think, you know, as educators, looking at writers like you that develop characters well, and analyzing before you have them write their own characters is one of the best things that you can do. We call it mentor text, using a mentor text to see how authors do that. And, you know, look, you've already inspired somebody this summer that has a story to tell and wants to write about their characters. That's very exciting. Can you give us a little blip into your book that's coming out next summer?
Yeah, sure. It's called In the Wild Light. It's about two kids from a small town in rural East Tennessee, which is the Appalachian part of Tennessee. They're from a small town that's been hit hard by the opioid epidemic. My main character's name is Cash Pruitt. He lives with his grandparents after his mother died of a fentanyl overdose. His grandfather, beloved grandfather, is dying of emphysema slowly. And Cash's best friend is named Delaney Doyle. Now, Delaney's mother is also addicted to opioids. Actually, they met through Narratine. And so that's how they became friends. But Delaney is a genius. And she makes this important discovery. She discovers a fungus in a cave that acts as a powerful antibiotic that kills all antibiotic-resistant bacteria. She manages to isolate it and then get it into the hands of some people with real capacity to research it and to publish findings based on it. So she kind of gets this widespread acclaim, and a benefactor steps forward and offers to pay for her to go to this elite private school, actually in Connecticut. And that's got an amazing STEM program. They're trying to become the best in the nation. And so they're going and recruiting brilliant minds. And that's what Delaney is. But Delaney will only accept the scholarship if they give one to her best friend Cash as well. Mm. And so Cash ends up going to this elite private school in Connecticut where he doesn't feel like he belongs at all. And he discovers an identity through poetry. So that's kind of what the book is about. I actually take a crack at writing some real poetry in the book from Cash's perspective, because I absolutely love poetry. I am in awe of it. And this was a kind of a safe way for me to try it on for size. So there are Easter eggs to all three of my previous books in the Wild Light. There's a really fun cameo from the Serpent King. There's Nana Betsy from Goodbye Days makes an appearance, because it turns out that Cash is her grandnephew. If that makes sense.
Oh wow! Okay.
And there are Easter eggs to Rayne and Delilah's Midnight Matinee. So
if I hadn't read Rayne and Delilah twice, I would not have picked up on the fact that we had music from the Serpent King in there. You know, it's just amazing when you read books again that you love, what you learn about the characters. It's so much fun. We appreciate you being here, and we are going to do a little writing activity to write the day out, as we do with National Writing Projects. There's Mr. Brian and Miss Tanya.
Well, before she puts the next slide up, Susan, I realize that this is you and Jeff, not me and you. This looks like you and Jeff. National Writing Project. Jeff, I have to tell you, I cannot wait to read the book you're working on now.
Either.
Summer of 2021. You have sold me. I'm ready.
Hey, Jeff, so you wrote that before the coronavirus. That was already into the publisher, because I can remember seeing that you got that book in. Wow. Huh.
Yeah.
That's going to be, I'm excited about that too. We'll have to revisit and have you on again and talk with you again. Okay, so for our writing out the day, I just want to offer some solutions for teachers. You know, like I told you, I use the stick figures for really looking at character development. And, you know, I want you today to spend a few minutes using your ideas to do any kind of piece of writing. And a lot of times I start with things that are very simplistic, that have structure to them so that kids can feel successful with their writing, whether it be writing a haiku about a character, or writing an I am poem, which is very structured, or writing a 6-room poem with you know, designated parts about the characters to create it, or whether it's a letter to one of the characters. So if you'll take a few minutes to do that. Brian, are we going to give 3 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. And I tell you, there are endless possibilities. But Jeff uses letter writing. You know, Carver writes a letter to the admissions people when he's trying to apply for college. And then my all-time favorite letter is from Dee Dee at the end of Rayne and Delilah, where you really see her character shine through. So if you'll just take a few minutes.
Susan and Jeff, I just want to thank you. The character I started out with at the beginning. I just watched The Mandalorian. I binge watched, and I chose the character of Baby Yoda. So he doesn't really have a developed character yet, but he has this destiny in him. And I was just thinking about, his 3 fingers and the way he moves characters at a very young age. And, he's been a metaphor for me about teaching and how all of us should be working with the baby Yodas in our care, and that every kid has the power of carrying the Force with them, to be a Jedi. And he doesn't represent the hatred and malevolence that we're seeing so much of right now in our nation. And I was thinking, so I chose the letter writing, like what if Yoda was to write the people of Earth right now about what's going on, and he's just admitting that he failed the Force.
Now,
Anyway.
I was working on a haiku about Carver, since I completed a stick figure on him. Guilt-ridden Carver tries to lift the stain of death. Friends lessen his grief.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah.
It's a good way to help kids, really grapple with characters, and they have the most fun doing this, especially the high school kids. They love it. So, and that was a lot of fun for me too.
I had one question that I wondered if Jeff would be willing to ask of Susan, because, you talked about 3 teachers that influenced you as a writer. As a writer, do you have questions for teachers like us about teaching of writing? I mean, what is a curiosity that you have about our profession? I put you on the spot.
Yes, it can be difficult.
Well, this is a hard question, because I don't tend to sit on questions and let them go unanswered. If I want to know something, I go and I find somebody and I ask it. So I don't know that I've got an outstanding question about writing for teachers of writing. I'd have to think about that.
Well, you can email us.
I'll let you off the hook, Jeff. I'll say I don't usually say what I was writing about, but this interview is really powerful to me. It really struck a chord in my heart. So forgive me, but I wrote my haiku about you from this interview, and I wrote, telling the truth, he walks, characters in his head, making real world sing.
Ooh, I like that.
It could be another
I
type.
like that a lot.
Yeah, Jeff, and one thing, Tanya, before you talk a little bit about the National Writing Project, I just want to tell you that one of my all-time favorite quotes is from Mr. Rogers. And when I read your work, I think about it, because he said that anything that's human is mentionable, and anything that is mentionable can be manageable. And when we talk about our feelings, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, less scary. The people we trust with the important talk can help us know that we are not alone. And that's what you have done for so many young adults and older people as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It's an honor to do it.
I want to thank all of you. This has been a really beautiful way for me to spend an hour in a very dark week. Susan, thank you so much for representing the whole huge network of National Writing Project teachers who love young adult literature and are excited about Jeff Zentner's books. Jeff, I can't thank you enough for the work that you put out in the world. We talk a lot about the importance of representation and people who often don't see themselves in books, and poor kids and kids in the middle of the country, and kids who have to live with a terrible thing that they have done or have caused to happen, and find their way through the rest of the world. They don't always find themselves in the pages of books, and that you create such books is really, really important to everyone, and to teachers and our network especially. So thank you so much for your work, and thank you for spending this hour talking to us about it. I haven't heard a more compelling and exciting description of the writing process than the one you shared today. I love it. I'm going to be thinking about it for a long time to come. So really,
the way we go grocery shopping.
yeah, it makes every place I have to wait for anything is going to be so much more interesting now.
Exactly.
Well, and let me just say this in closing, that the fundamental kind of project of storytelling and creating characters is to live other lives and to see the world through other perspectives. And we are having this conversation at a time in America when it's very, very apparent that many people don't walk in the shoes of other people, and who don't try to view the world through the eyes of other people. And I just, Black Lives Matter. That's all I want to say. This has been a really difficult week for a lot of people. Man, I just think about, I think about what it would be like to live with that kind of systemic racism on a daily basis. And it's unimaginable to me. It would really be awful. And it's very, very difficult to think about. And I just want to encourage everybody who loves stories to seek out the stories of the people who are different than you. Seek out, man, I'm such a crybaby. Sorry.
I cried 3 times during your interview, but my camera was off.
Jeff, I'm borrowing a colleague of mine, Wendy Coley. She always says, I have to warn everybody I'm a leaker. And when she starts talking, and when I talk, I get passionate, and this is an important time for all of us right now, and we are all on high emotion, so I get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We sometimes say at the National Writing Project, when we begin to tell our stories, that we could call ourselves the National Crying Project. So I feel like you've actually just joined our community in a very important way. So,
well, I'll happily take it, but I just want to encourage everybody, go out and read the work of Black Americans, read the work of Black authors, see the world through their eyes, see what they experience, come to know their lives.
Yes.
Thank you. That is a great place for us to end. I want to say to our viewers and listeners, thank you so much for joining us. If you're new to the National Writing Project, we really want you to come back. So please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. We have a Facebook community that you can join if you want to be part of conversations like these. And you can go to nwp.org, where you can sign up for our monthly newsletter and stay connected to all of the great work of the teachers in our network. Thank you. Thank you, Brian, for getting me into this crazy project. Thank you, Susan, for your great questions that led to such a beautiful interview. And most of all, thank you, Jeff, for joining us today.
Thank you, guys. This was a real honor. I appreciate it.
NWP Radio.
You're listening to NWP Radio, a production of the National Writing Project.
NWP. NWP Radio.